with each other. We want to invite you to tell us what part of the state you're dialing in from, maybe another part of the city. Maybe you are tuning in from another part of the world. So please use the comments, tell us where you're from. And by the way, if you see somebody you know, tell them hello. Maybe you see their name here.
Or if you see someone you don't know, make a new friend and introduce yourself. We're currently on week, I think, 47?
At the very least.
47 maybe of the quarantine. And what's saving me right now is going for long walks by myself. Did I mention we have 4 girls? Also keeping in touch with our family with phone calls and Zoom. And we discovered that you can play games online as well.
Oh yeah, lots of board games. Yes, connecting with family and friends over Zoom. I know we're all zoomed out, but it's still pretty good. The fact that I can get on camera and have a video conference call with my parents in Guatemala. It's been beautiful.
It's amazing. We're doing puzzles, making the kids take walks, getting outdoors. So we'd love to know what's saving you during this quarantine. Please leave a note below in the comments.
And now, on behalf of our watershed community, we are so glad that you joined us this morning. We hope that you enjoy our time together. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on.
Buenos dias, Watershed.
Good morning, Watershed. We're so glad to have you joining us for our series, Cabin Fever Church. My name is Jenny Robles, and this is my husband, Rich.
I'm Rich Robles, and we're coming to you from the Quill Hollow area of the city.
We've been involved with Watershed for over 6 years now. Between ourselves and our 4 daughters, we've been involved in Greenhouse, both serving and participants. Shed students for the older kids. We've been involved in blocks.
And basically anything that Matt O'Neill gets us to do. So anything related to blocks, but I've also been involved in the lead team. So we've had a lot of fun in the last 6 years. So now, since we cannot be physically with each other, we want to invite you to tell us what part of the state you're dialing in from, maybe another part of the city. Maybe you are tuning in from another part of the world. So please use the comments, tell us where you're from. And by the way, if you see somebody you know, tell them hello. Maybe you see their name here.
Or if you see someone you don't know, make a new friend and introduce yourself. We're currently on week, I think, 47?
At the very least.
47 maybe of the quarantine. And what's saving me right now is going for long walks by myself. Did I mention we have 4 girls? Also keeping in touch with our family with phone calls and Zoom. And we discovered that you can play games online as well.
Oh yeah, lots of board games. Yes, connecting with family and friends over Zoom. I know we're all zoomed out, but it's still pretty good. The fact that I can get on camera and have a video conference call with my parents in Guatemala. It's been beautiful.
It's amazing. We're doing puzzles, making the kids take walks, getting outdoors. So we'd love to know what's saving you during this quarantine. Please leave a note below in the comments.
And now, on behalf of our watershed community, we are so glad that you joined us this morning. We hope that you enjoy our time together. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my light is almost gone, Hear my cry, Lord, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When the darkness appears and the night draws near, and the day is past and gone. At the river I stand, guide my feet, Lord, hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, oh, hold my hand and lead me home. Lead me home.
Hi, I'm Donna O'Neill, and if you've been around for even a short amount of time, you may have seen me in some of the Watershed music videos that we've done for Cabin Fever, or acting silly on some of those videos as well. But my husband is Matt O'Neill, and he's one of the co-pastors here at Watershed. And we started Watershed with the Hofords back in 2005. We've been a part of it for about 15 years, and it's a very important community to me. And I'd say more now than ever, it's been a great community for me to get connected, even if it's just via online, just to connect with people that I call family away from family. So I hope it's important to you as well. I'm glad that you've chosen to join with us today. And I'm just going to make you aware of some things that are coming up ahead with Watershed. So next Sunday, Britt Barron will be joining us for the next installment of Cabin Fever. If you're unfamiliar with her, she's a sought-out speaker and also a pastor that communicates issues such as personal development, race, gender, and sexuality. And she's also the author of a new book called Worth It, Overcome Your Fear and Embrace the Life You Were Made For.
What's up, Watershed? It's Britt Barron coming to you from Pasadena, California. I'm one of the pastors at New Abbey Church, and I am so excited to hang out with you this Sunday. This is a wild season. Those are parrots just flying over my house, in case you're wondering. This is a wild season, and as such, it might feel like the time that we need to maybe pause, and maybe step back from difficult conversations, but I actually think this is the time that we need to move into them. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad, and I cannot wait to get into some honest, vulnerable, and real conversations with you this Sunday. I hope you are there. I am excited to talk about everything from church and money and my new book, Worth It, that's coming out. Yeah, so if you want to hang out with me on Sunday, I'll see you there. If you want to hang out with me any other time, you can find me at Britt Barron on Instagram, brittbarron.com. I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you, and I'll see you there.
So please consider joining with us next Sunday to hear from Britt. Now, if you're a junior or senior high student, you're going to want to join us this evening for game night. So that's going to begin at about 7 p.m. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're also going to have a viewing party for our junior and our senior Shed students that is for the show Stranger Things. So if you're interested in any of that, you can contact our youth pastor, David Roberts, at david@watershed.charlotte.com, or you can check out our webpage if you have any questions about that. So if you're new to Watershed, I'd like to invite you to a thing called Shed 101, and it's where our co-pastors Matt and Scott get together and they just talk to you about your spiritual journey and who we are as a church. We'd love to have you. Monday, June 1st at 7 p.m. is when we're going to do this. And you can sign up through the link in the comment section if you're interested in joining us. To our volunteers, thank you so much for working with the Freedom Communities and our Second Harvest Food Bank team to help feed our city here in Charlotte. It's so important that we as a community keep focusing outward. If you're interested at any level getting involved, please contact David Roberts at david@watershed.charlotte.com, and it's a great opportunity to get involved. I hope that you do. Finally, if there's ever a time where a community like Watershed is needed, I believe that time is now. So I want to take a moment to just say thank you to all of you who give generously to this community. If you're interested in giving to Watershed routinely or even on a one-time basis, you can do so either through our website or an app or the link that is in the comment section today. So thank you again for joining us this morning. We love you. Thank you for believing in the work that we're doing and in this community. And I just hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
It's so hard to understand just where you're coming from, to try to see things from a different point of view. Trying not to pigeonhole or simply write you off. It's so much simpler if the parody is true. It's so easy to believe it's really you, but I refuse to buy into this tired narrative that anyone who doesn't run with me is a fool. And I believe together we could build a better bridge that spans the breadth of stars connecting me to you. Sick of towing party lines across the great divide. Sick of human hearts reduced to red or blue. There are still often times my thoughts of you are cardboard cutout lies. It's so much simpler if the parody is true. It's so easy to believe it's really you. It's so easy to believe it's really you. And I refuse to buy into this tired narrative that anyone who doesn't run with me is a fool. And I believe together we could build a better bridge that spans the breadth of stars connecting me to you. And why is it so hard to just remember that you have a past, a face, a heart, a name? Oh, it's so hard to just remember that we are this different than we are the same. I have to try. I have to try. So I refuse to buy into this tired narrative that anyone who doesn't run with me is a fool. And I believe together we could build a better bridge that spans the breadth of stars connecting me to you. Oh, I refuse to buy into this time
Good morning, Watershed. My name is Scott Hofert, and I'm one of the co-pastors here at Watershed, and it is really good to be with you this morning. Ray McKinnon is a person that I have been told for a couple of years I need to meet. Every time I hear his name, people are saying, "Oh, you don't know Ray and the work that he's doing?" And so maybe a year and a half or so ago, Matt and I reached out and said, "Is there a chance that we could just take a few minutes of your time?" He said, "Sure, come on over." And so we took lunch over to his office and had a chance to meet and interact with Ray and really hear from him and hear about the kind of impact that he's making here in our city. If you know Ray, you know that he is an activist. He is a pastor. He cares deeply about the political system and realizes it's a way to make profound change. He's a husband. He's a father. And he loves it really well. He's just a great guy to get to know and has experience in terms of what it means to make a dent in the margins of our city. And so sitting down with Ray over the last year or so, a couple of different times, I thought it's absolutely imperative that our people, that you Watershed, get to meet this man. And so what we had to do is we had to break this up in a couple of different sections because the content has shifted. When we first met a week and a half or so ago, there was some really good narrative that we were able to discuss. And then some things have happened recently that I felt it was really important that you hear from Ray. And so, Watershed, thank you for being with us this morning. Ray, thank you for being with us. And it's good to have you, one of the first Charlotteans we've been able to interview on Cabin Fever Church. So, Ray, let me ask you this question. Amid this COVID pandemic and all that's going on right now, how are you and your family doing these days?
Hey, Scott, man, it's really great to be with y'all. It was great meeting you guys over a year ago. But, during COVID, my family has been well, man. Like the parts of me that feels guilty saying that is a weird thing, but we've been well. We have 3 boys at home. From 19 down to 12, and my wife and Kelly, we've all been well. She's trying to figure out how to. She's an educator normally, so this isn't new teaching, but she works at the CMS office now, so she's adjusting to that. My boys are adjusting to being schooled at home, so it's been well. We've been figuring it out, and we are incredibly fortunate and blessed to have not been personally yet affected by COVID-19.
So we asked this question of a lot of our folks here at Watershed, and in some of these conversations we've been having, what is saving you right now? What is, amidst all the work that you're doing, we'll get into that here in a minute, and we'll hear more about what you're doing, but what is the thing or a couple of things that you're saying, all right, it's bringing a sense of rest or calm, or it's allowing me to infuse energy so I can go out and do the kind of work I'm doing?
So this is going to be really weird, but and I've gotten really into making smoothies. So weird, so random. So Kelly's my wife, and so with everybody home, our grocery bill is like double, right? Right. But she's been buying far more fresh fruit and vegetables than she did previously. So I've been making all of these concoctions of smoothies. So it's been, and all of my smoothies for the most, except the breakfast ones, include ginger, and I love it. And I don't know what it is, why it's kind of consumed, but it's just really fun to try all these different flavors. Today I tried a new one, it's blueberry lemon. It's really good with oatmeal. Yeah, man, you start out with the oatmeal, grind it up first, but it's just been this random thing that I've gotten a little obsessed about lately, and I've loved it. And so that's been the biggest new thing that I've done that's just random and weird during all of this. So, and it gives me energy. It's full of immuno boosting things. Like there's right. Always some ginger. There's always some honey or some some citrus or something. So, and spinach, and I don't mess with kale. Kale's too much. I'll do it. Yeah, that's it, man. It's random.
That's awesome. No, that's good. It's all good. So, would you give us a summary of the kind of work that you do in your church community, and then because I want to, that's kind of a setup question for how you are seeing this COVID-19 pandemic impacting those on the margins. I know that we had a little bit of conversation about this earlier a couple weeks ago, and so if maybe we can kind of hear the kind of work you're doing in terms of the ministry that you have there, and then how that's playing out for folks in your community there.
Sure, man. One thing that we've kind of always done at South Tryon. So I'm pastor at South Tryon United Methodist here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one thing that we have always done is try to be a community church. So in our community, we're a mission. And so we serve the Brook Hill and Southside Homes areas, particularly, not exclusively. And for folks who might not be aware, Brook Hill is in South End, and South End is one of the hot neighborhoods in Charlotte right now. But Brook Hill has been there for decades. It's a community over 30 acres with folks who are working poor, working class for the most part. There are folks there who are above that, but so we have done a lot of work around housing. As I said earlier, the South End area is really being gentrified, and so we saw a need for the advocacy for our neighbors when it comes to housing, and we offer other services through our work. And so we kind of, one thing one of our little mottos is connecting faith with real life. So the reality is where there is a need, we're wanting to be there to meet those needs. So it's maybe one day it's advocating for, funding housing in Brook Hill so folks can stay in place, or it's helping folks connect with supportive services. We have a community resource center there that helps connect folks with social services and those sorts of things. So the biggest thing that we try to do at Brook Hill is to make faith more than Sunday. The joke I always say is, we average about 50 to 70 people in worship on Sunday morning, but the number of folks who we reach during the week is triple, sometimes 4 times that every week. And so that's, for me, in my stage of life and ministry right now, the thing that's most important for me and for the congregation that I'm so fortunate to lead.
So, as one who is an activist and as one who takes faith very seriously, and I can only imagine what this looks like for you. But how do those two worlds dovetail? How do they inform each other? Being an activist and a person of faith. Yeah,
that's a really good question. I remember I grew up in the church in the 90s, and we were in youth group. We were always told to have this, our life verse. We had to come up with our life verse. And, mine is, even back then, I remember Micah 6:8, and then there's this verse in Isaiah talking about, the year of God's favor. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon you because God has anointed you to preach the good news to the poor, restoration of sight to the blind, and to declare God's year or acceptable year of God's favor. And then Micah 6:8 was, God has shown you what is required of you, and it's to act justice or to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk with humility before God. And so, those verses inform my faith. They inform my worldview and what I see as my call as not just a Christian, but as a person in this community. And so, for me, when I think about advocacy, it's all about how raising our voices for system change, raising our voices to ensure that those who folks want to push away are centered. And again, it's hard to really get to change if we're not, a societal change, if we're not in the arenas. And so politics is a part of that. It's not the only thing. It's part of ensuring that we are advocating and standing with our siblings, no matter who they are, no matter how they worship, if they worship, who they love. But that's for me the thing. I mean, I don't think it's hard to do one without the other. Although you can, it's not the only thing, but it is definitely a thing.
So I've heard you say this a couple times. You were talking about those on the margins who are pushed away, and you need to bring them back to the center. What do you mean by bringing people back to the center?
Yeah, I mean, you think of, I mean, this is here in North Carolina, for instance. Right now, we're in the middle of this reopen campaign, right? It's where folks are saying, "Hey, it's time to reopen North Carolina because the economy is being impacted." That those arguments come from a belief in a system where profit is the determining factor, and that is what it is. We can have a conversation about capitalism versus other things, but I don't really want to get into that. But with arguments like that, it tells you what centered are profits, what centered is money, and so that informs the conversation. So what I'm talking about is centering people, and not just people on the margins who've been either there their entire lives, pushed there, relegated there, whatever.
Gotcha.
So when we're having conversations, they're at the center of those conversations. When we're asking, what systems and what policies we're going to enact and propped up, we are asking ourselves, how is this going to impact the poorest among us? How is this going to impact those with diminished or no seeming power, right? So that's when we center people, and then for me, when we're centering the most vulnerable, the people who bear in their bodies and on their backs the outcomes of our policies. I think that's the better way. I think that's the more beloved. We're getting closer to that beloved community, where I think, which is what I think is at the heart of our faith tradition.
Such good words. Wow. So being that you are working with so many different folks, how is this COVID pandemic impacting those in the margins? I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this before, but I thought it was really profound how you commented on that. Could you share with our folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID-19, this pandemic, is impacting folks on the margin the way everything, all of our systems impact the most vulnerable, the poor folks. They're being hit the hardest, right? So, there's a conversation that's being had here in North Carolina and in Charlotte, and probably all over the nation about, I read today that, in North Carolina, I think Black folks comprise about 12 to 13% of the population. We account for 39% of the COVID folks who contract COVID, and about 38% of the deaths in COVID. And so folks are asking the question, why is that? Why is that? And, none of these things happen in a vacuum, right? So if you look at, certainly we are disproportionate in the folks who are contracting and being killed by COVID. But I'll bet, I haven't done this, but I'll bet that we also disproportionately account for folks in the service and the service sector, which puts folks at a greater risk of contracting COVID. And I'll also bet that there is and one thing we also know about COVID, the little we do know, is that, the rate of death correlates with these things they call comorbidities. And so, like, if you have, heart disease or diabetes, whatever, on top of that. And then Black folks disproportionately have those comorbidities. Let's say one reason could be because of housing. And you say, how does housing or transportation have anything to do with this, right? When we start thinking about food deserts, so, right, you've got folks in communities. Most folks are being pushed farther and farther out, farther and farther from public transportation. And so the closest thing they might have for food isn't at a fresh food produce store or shop. It's at the convenience store or fast food. And we know those things aren't healthy. Like I said before, Kelly, our grocery bill has gone up so much, and we have 3 boys at home and me and Kelly, and we're fortunate, man. We're fortunate because we can go and we buy fresh fruit, we buy our food, and we can do that. We don't have to, on Fridays we'll get our food takeout just to support local businesses, but we don't have to. We don't have to depend on going right down the road to Cookout or wherever, but some folks do. So COVID-19 is doing what all strains on a system do, and it's exposing the cracks. It's exposing the vulnerabilities. I was talking on Zoom the other night. I did another Zoom similar to this, and a friend of mine, Braxton Winston, who's a local city council member, chimed in, had a great quote, and he said that the thing that COVID is doing is just like any pipe under pressure. Eventually, that pipe is going to burst. And what's happened, COVID-19 is exposing the fact that we have vulnerable systems and we have vulnerable populations, and we are not prepared for the outcome of that. And so our folks have been impacted. I mean, you have folks who've lost their jobs, certainly, but you also have folks who've gotten sick. You have folks, and some folks, black and brown, frankly, non-white folks tend to also be less trusting of government for good reason, right? And so I think all of those things contribute to why there's been some impact on disproportionate impact on our communities. And so COVID is doing what all tragedies and systems like this do. It's exposing our cracks. It's exposing who we center and what we center. Namely, in this capitalist system in which we live, we center profit over people, and profit will win out every single time in that system.
Wow, there's so much to mine there. I want to jump into a little bit of your expertise in terms of the housing narrative, and you kind of bumped into it, but I think for a lot of people, when we talk about the plight of housing or the prices of housing going up and people being pushed out of, displaced from where they've spent decades, I think to some people it's, well, that's just the market. It's can't they just, people move to the suburbs or go somewhere else because, find cheaper housing if it's there. What's the big deal? And I know there's some complexities that could, and that's a really naive question in a sense, but I know for some folks, they literally don't understand some of the ways in which you understand by the work that you do, why that is so painful, so difficult for somebody to be displaced.
I mean, I think on a bigger scale, you can take like South End, for instance. 5 to 10 years ago, South End was not, it was not what it is now. Right. Brook Hill was there. Brook Hill is where Brook Hill is because it wasn't some desirable part of town. So on a broader perspective, no matter where it is, eventually it can and probably will be gentrified. But looking even deeper, in the Charlotte metro area where we live, and that isn't just Mecklenburg County, it includes the surrounding counties as well, the housing market is on fire. Folks are, we can't build units quickly enough. And I'm going to geek out just a little bit. When you're having the conversation about housing, it's hard to have the conversation without understanding some key terms. So when we talk about affordability, I like to say, and others like to say that, everything is affordable. The question is affordable for whom? So in Charlotte, when we're talking about affordability, we use something called the AMI, which is an acronym that means the area median income. So the area median income, 100% of the AMI in Charlotte. So if you're making, if you're at 100%, you're basically at $80,000, $79,000 to $80,000. So when we start talking about affordability, we're really talking about folks who make less than that. So if we're, where I really like to focus is at 30% or below area median income. So we're talking about folks who make less than $24,000 a year. And think about that, $24,000 a year in Charlotte is nothing for and then you go kind of up from there. And so it's hard to have the conversation about pushing people farther out, especially in the Charlotte metro area, because we're a region who depend heavily on transportation, on cars. It's expensive to have a car. If you can buy a car, you also have to buy insurance, and it has to, you have to be able to pay to get your car inspected. And if you don't get your car inspected, if you don't get insurance, you're going to get pulled over. And when you get pulled over, you're going to be in the court system. North Carolina has some of the highest fees once you get in the court system. So let's say you do have a car. You're going to have to pay for gas. You're going to have to pay for all of these things. But let's say you don't have a car, like a lot of people who are poor, you have to depend on public transportation. We do not have great public transportation in this area. We just recently moved from this spoke wheel system, basically where everybody has to come to a hub and go out. It could take you 2 hours to get to one place in Charlotte, in the Charlotte metro area. And if you live in Huntersville or in one of the outlying towns, forget about it. It's going to take you forever. So it is a little naive to think that we can just push people out and let the market do what the market does. That's the reality in this system. But I also think it's the reason this system is immoral and unjust. Any system, in my opinion, any system that values profitability, that values that over people, is a system that is morally bankrupt. It's a system that should not be, certainly not propped up by those of us who are people of faith. We must scrutinize it. We must do all that we can to make it fair, because it's my opinion that but for people of faith and people of goodwill, we would see how insidious and immoral this system is. But I think because you have faith communities, because you have churches, and because you have people of goodwill who give the support to folks who capitalism by its design does not lift up, it doesn't seem quite as bad. And we are notorious as people, myself included, we are notorious for people for thinking, if it didn't happen to me, or if it hasn't happened to me or someone I know, it didn't happen or it hasn't happened. It's just the way that we are. But folks who are poor, folks whose communities have been their communities for decades, like many folks in Brookhill, can't just up and go. And the other reality, Scott, is we have such a deficit of housing at that 30% AMI point, that where are they going to go? We have tens of thousands of deficits for that unit. So folks who are, like I said, making basically less than $24,000 a year, there's nowhere for them to go. Right? I mean, it's not like we have some vat out in, Pineville or Cornelius or Huntersville somewhere. We're just waiting for folks who are poor. And let's also be clear. Folks who are at this 30% AMI, many of them, the vast majority of them, aren't lazy. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. Right. Another thing I say is you can't have the conversation about affordable housing without having the conversation about wages. The minimum wage in North Carolina is still what it was when I was in high school.
Wow.
And I've been out of high school for about a long time. For a person to be able to live in Charlotte working at minimum wage, they will have to work 80 hours, 2 full-time jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's way more complicated. So if we really, if we understood, the hurdles over which folks must jump to be able to even live in Charlotte, I think we'd be a lot more conscious and sensitive about some assumptions like that.
So Ray, we've been talking about a lot of really important things that in terms of the work you've been doing with housing and the role you have at your church and all the really important work here in Charlotte. So let's turn maybe more to the national scene if we can. So the tragic murder of Ahmaud Arbery. I'm not even sure the question to pose. Maybe more importantly, would you share from your heart what you think you want to say, or maybe we here at Watershed need to hear?
Given the opportunity now to speak to a predominantly white audience, I think the first thing that I would say to folks in light of this and other things is to ask ourselves, to ask yourself, how am I showing up in this moment? I think I shared earlier that one of the things that stuck out to me as a black person in a predominantly white space when Michael Brown was shot, when Tamir Rice was killed, was the silence. And sometimes, especially in Christian spaces, folks hide behind the need, the want to not be divisive as a way to remain silent. And I think the thing that, even when for me, for instance, as a United Methodist pastor, there are a lot of my colleagues who are very progressive, right, in some certain ways, certain regards. And there's a movement in the United Methodist Church called For Everyone Born. And it's this idea that it's from that song, there's a place at the table for everyone born when it comes to equity, especially as it relates to homosexuality. I can count on certain colleagues to really be there, and we're kind of pushing shoulders in together to say this is not okay. This too must be made right. But some of the same people are definitely silent on this and other issues of racial injustice. And what I need for my white siblings to do is to find their voice in equal measure when it comes to these injustices. Because in the same way that our silence serves nobody but the oppressor when it comes to homosexuality, silence only serves the oppressor in this sense. I've heard folks to say, somebody the other day on social media said, well, to be fair, this, speaking of this case, and I responded to her, I said, to be fair to whom? She said, to be fair, these things take time normally. I have a perspective of being adjacent to law enforcement, and things just take time. And my question was, to be fair to whom? Because the idea is that we're going to, there's this fairness quota, right? Because there's a person dead. It took 74 days for the state, after outcry from the broader community, to even arrest the people who, on camera, killed this man. And so I asked her, well, to whom are you being fair? Because you're certainly not being fair to Ahmaud. You're certainly not being fair to his family. You're being fair to a mirage of a system that's supposed to be fair. And so what I say to my white siblings is, it's not enough to just run with Ahmaud. It's not enough to be outraged online. You must use your voice. You must speak, even if you're speaking with a shaking voice, but it has to go beyond rhetoric. As I said earlier, you have to do that inner work and then set about righting this wrong, because there will always be another hashtag. Right? There will be. I mean, the reality that Kelly and I have as parents of black boys is fear. My son you just met is 12 years old. 12. Which is the same age Tamir Rice was when he was killed within seconds of a police officer. And you just saw him. He's cute. He's adorable.
Yes.
He's little. He's clearly a kid. Killed. Dead. Our
position in this struggle for equity, our position in this fight that everything be made right, certainly is personal to us. But we need for it to be personal to you as well, Scott, and to your neighbors, and to your family, and to your parishioners, and to everybody who's listening to us this morning.
So, Ray, thank you. That is so meaningful. One of there's so much we could pull from that. One of the things that you said was something to this idea that you can't be afraid to speak out, even if you're not sure the way to speak or the way to say what you feel is inside. I know a lot of my white brothers and sisters, we do find ourselves silent because we don't want to say the wrong words. We don't want to add fuel to the fire. What would you say to those of us that live in that kind of a fear, where we don't want to offend our brothers, and we're trying to understand what it means to speak into this and not say the thing that's going to make it worse? Could you speak that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think one thing to remember is when you're speaking, it's not you're speaking to folks who look like you, right? You're speaking to your family. You're speaking to your community. You're speaking to those folks, and not necessarily to us. So you say what you would need to hear so that folks can see. Because here's the reality. For most people, it didn't happen if I can't imagine it happening to me.
Yeah.
We can tell you all day long that this is true. Because, in fact, we've been saying it for a long time. This is true. This is, what's your reality is not my reality. It's not my wife's reality, my kids' realities. So to folks who are like, I just don't know what to say. I don't want, just say something. One, and you're not speaking to me, right? I don't. It would be important, frankly, like for you, Scott, to call up a close person to you who is non-white and say, hey, this is me showing up. I don't know what to say. I love you. That happened to me a lot this weekend from some of my friends who are white. And what isn't helpful, I'll say this: what isn't helpful is to come saying to me things you're not saying to your white siblings, right? And because we know that this is effed up, right? We know that this is wrong. Like, tell them. I told a friend of mine today who sent me this really cool thing, and it was funny, but it was true. And I said to him, I said, hey, bro, I get it. I'm not white, though. Send it to your white friend. And he understood. I mean, that's my boy. He's white. He's my boy. And he was just like, nah, I just wanted you to see this, too. And that's the other thing, man. Like, you all have to speak to your siblings, because at the end of the day, it's going to take white folks to really dismantle the system that they're benefiting from, whether they know it or not. So, I get it. We don't want to say the wrong thing. But if we start off realizing that at the end of the day, I'm not your audience as a non-white person, but your white siblings are, that might help give you a little more perspective. What are the things that you need to hear? And you can say, you don't have to be like me and, use your social media platform and blast it out there. You can use however you want to. But I will say this: if you use your social media platform to speak out against other things, but you just lose your voice in this, do some interrogation of yourself. If you're willing to use your platform to speak to to speak out against other injustices, but for this one, you're gonna, let's wait for everything to come out. But was he really in that house? But I think that means we need to pause and think, because for me, right? Like, I know I use my platform a lot to speak out against injustice. But I try to keep the same energy, right? I try to keep my same energy against injustice, because I believe that injustice is injustice is injustice. I believe it's wrong for us to have a different standard when it comes to a person's human sexuality. I also think it's wrong for us to have a different standard when it comes to a person's race, their identity, or their ethnicity. And so I try to keep that same level. I try to remember that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I try to keep the same level of outrage when I see immigrants in cages as I see black bodies being gunned down in the street by lynch mobs, right? So if you're not like me, you don't use your platform for injustices ever, fine, but figure out a way to use your voice to expend some type of energy for the cause. But if it's just this thing that you don't want to be divisive about, ask yourself why and how you can work through that, because you need to work through that.
So, Ray, this whole morning has been so good because you've given us, I feel like, ways in which not only we can reset and rethink, but then do something with our time. So thank you for that. So you've graciously committed not only to be with us this morning, but to be with us Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, where we can discuss more intimately these conversations about housing, all the way to Ahmaud Arbery and the tragic murder that he has experienced. And so to be able to sort of talk more openly and more casually, we look forward to that. Thank you for being willing to be with us that evening. Thank you for your time this morning, Ray, and just being willing to be open and honest with us, to be willing to speak into really the way in which we need to continue to grow and evolve and wake up here at Watershed. And look forward to just Tuesday night. And thank you again for your time this morning.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. I look forward to being with y'all on Tuesday, and I look forward to continuing to find new colleagues to push forward justice together with. So bless you all. Be well.